think about those times maybe you've seen it or even felt it yourself where something just felt completely impossible and then suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah, you see it in action sports a lot, right? Someone lands a trick in the afternoon that seemed totally out there that same morning.
Exactly. But it's not just, elite athletes. We all face these challenges, these personal mountains that just feel insurmountable sometimes.
And what's really interesting when you dig into it
Mm-hmm.
is that these breakthroughs, whether it's sports or science or just hitting a personal goal, they're usually not random flashes of brilliance.
Right?
There's often a method, a learnable way to get there. And that's precisely what we're getting into today.
Yeah, we're doing a deep dive into Steven Kotler's book, The Art of Impossible, a peak performance primer.
Hmm.
Think of it as like a condensed guide to his ideas on how to push past those limits we set for ourselves, whether that's, a huge innovation at work or just achieving something significant personally.
Our plan is really to pull out the key, actionable stuff from what's honestly a very dense book.
It covers so much ground motivation, learning science, creativity, flow.
Yeah, the psychology of drive, how learning actually works in the brain, where creative ideas come from, the mechanics of flow states. We're going to try and synthesize the really crucial bits.
Hopefully saving you some time and maybe preventing that feeling of just being swamped by it all.
Exactly.
And really, this isn't just for, extreme adventurers or tech billionaires. The principles Kotler discusses are grounded in biology,
Right. They apply to pretty much anyone.
including you listening right now, if you're looking to push your own boundaries and, well, achieve more, whatever that looks like for you.
Okay, so let's start with this concept of impossible. It feels like such a solid wall, doesn't it?
Totally. But Kotler quotes his mentor saying something really powerful. Something about 10 years practice.
Yeah, very little is impossible with 10 years practice. It really reframes it, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that what feels impossible now might just need a process, dedicated effort over time.
He points to big historical examples, like how dreaming of flight eventually led to the moon landing. Each step probably felt impossible at the time.
Right, until someone figured out the underlying principles.
And he applies that same thinking to personal peak performance. He calls it an infinite game.
An infinite game, meaning there's no final win.
Kind of. The focus isn't on beating others, but on continually playing, continually striving. The real loss, he suggests, is not trying to play full out, not pushing towards your impossible.
That reminds me of something, I think William James said something similar, about how most people live way below their potential.
Yeah, that we habitually fail to tap into all our resources. The missed opportunity isn't necessarily failing to change the world, but failing to chase what feels just out of reach for us.
Okay, so if we want to play this infinite game, what actually powers us? What keeps us going? Kotler argues that the top performers, they don't just have one single motivator.
No, it's more like they tap into a whole stack of emotional fuels.
Yeah,
That's what gets them through the arduous trek, as he calls it, of chasing big goals.
and looking at it from like an evolutionary standpoint,
Well, scarcity was a huge driver,
It-
right? Lack of resources forces certain behaviors.
fight or flight.
Yeah, but also exploring, innovating, finding new food sources, better shelter. So fear and curiosity become these really fundamental drivers.
Or pushes us away from danger. Curiosity pulls us towards the new.
Exactly. And then Kotler makes this distinction between extrinsic motivators, things like money, status, the external stuff,
Right.
and the intrinsic drivers, that feeling of autonomy, mastering a skill, having a sense of purpose.
And he points out that shift, doesn't he? After a certain income level, like $75,000 or so, the intrinsic stuff becomes way more important for motivation and performance.
Yeah, that matches a lot of research.
Yeah.
Once our basic needs are covered, we're really driven by having control, autonomy, getting better at things, mastery, and feeling connected to something meaningful purpose.
It's like the money stops being the main goal and becomes more of a facilitator for those deeper drives.
Precisely. And this is all playing out chemically in our brains.
Ah, the neurochemistry part. Dopamine, serotonin.
Right. Dopamine's huge for desire, for seeking, for that feeling of meaning. Correct. Serotonin gives us satisfaction. Then you have endorphins and anandamide, kind of natural painkillers and bliss inducers.
So these chemicals reward the behaviors that help us survive and thrive.
Yeah, but what's fascinating is that it's not just a reward after the fact. Dopamine, for instance, often spikes before we even take a risk or explore something new. It's encouraging the seeking behavior itself.
Okay, so understanding that chemical basis is kind of key to intentionally building our own drive then.
Absolutely. Which leads us to how we actually cultivate those intrinsic drivers. Kotler has this idea he calls the passion recipe.
The passion recipe sounds tasty.
Yeah. It's a process, though, not instant. It's about building from curiosity to passion and then ultimately to purpose.
So it starts with just being curious.
Basically, yeah. Nurturing the things you're naturally interested in. And he points out something cool. When you have multiple streams of curiosity and they start to overlap and connect,
That's where the magic happens.
kind of, it boosts engagement, sure, but it also fires up your brain's pattern recognition system, making connections between different ideas.
And each connection gives you that little dopamine hit we talked about.
Exactly. It reinforces the learning, makes you want to find more connections.
Then how do we turn that initial curiosity into something deeper, like passion?
He suggests diving into the history of a subject and also its technical language.
History and language, why those specifically?
Well, history gives context, a narrative. Our brains love stories. It shows how ideas developed. And the technical language lets you be more precise, make sharper connections.
Got it. Okay, so curiosity leads to passion,
Mhm.
and then passion leads to purpose.
That's the idea. Purpose gives you that really deep, sustained, motivational energy. And Kotler says it actually changes your brain
Changes your brain.
neurobiologically. It can make your amygdala, your fear center, less reactive. So less stress, more resilience. It also primes your brain to notice things relevant to your purpose.
Wow. Okay. And then alongside purpose, we have autonomy and mastery.
Right. Autonomy is that fundamental need to feel like you're in control, steering your own ship. Mastery is the drive to get really good at steering it.
This sounds like self-determination theory, Atesi and Ryan.
Exactly. Kotler references their work heavily. Their point is that fulfilling these needs for autonomy, mastery, and purpose, or relatedness in their model, is essential for psychological energy and motivation.
So having autonomy isn't just nice, it actually makes us better.
Yeah, the research shows it boosts focus, productivity, optimism, resilience, creativity, even physical health.
He gives that Patagonia example, right? The freedom to surf policy.
Yeah, letting employees prioritize exercise, which actually helps them get into flow states more easily. It shows trust and boosts autonomy.
And mastery. It's
Sure.
just the pursuit of getting better.
That spikes dopamine. It reinforces the effort involved in tackling important, challenging goals. That feeling of progress is incredibly motivating.
Okay, so we've got this foundation. Curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery, these internal drivers. How do they connect to getting into that peak performance state flow?
Well, flow, as Kotler defines it, is that state that often follows intense focus, where you're just completely absorbed in the present moment. Action and awareness merge.
Yeah, time gets weird, self-consciousness disappears.
Exactly. And here's the really crucial link. Those intrinsic drivers we just discussed, they act as flow triggers.
How so?
They naturally boost dopamine and norepinephrine, key chemicals for focus. But they also do something else. They lower your cognitive load.
Cognitive load, like the mental energy spent thinking about other stuff.
Precisely. When you're genuinely curious, passionate, driven by purpose, feeling autonomous, and striving for mastery, your brain doesn't have to spend as much energy forcing itself to pay attention or worrying about other things.
So getting the motivation right clears the mental decks, making flow more likely.
That's a great way to put it. Kotler says when your motivation aligns with your actions, it lifts that psychological weight of feeling like you should be doing something else. Flow can happen more automatically then.
And the opposite is true too. If you're disconnected from those drivers.
Yeah, he links that misalignment to things like anxiety and depression. Feeling disconnected from meaningful values, doing work that doesn't engage your curiosity or sense of purpose.
Or feeling controlled, lacking autonomy, or stuck doing things that are either boringly easy or crushingly hard, not building mastery.
Right. It goes against our fundamental psychological wiring. It really underscores how vital it is to get that internal motivational stack working for you, not against you.
Okay, so we're motivated, we understand the potential for flow. How do we actually do the impossible stuff? Goals and grit seem key here.
Absolutely. Kotler talks about how our brain has these interconnected systems, one for goal direction, one for pattern recognition, one for acquiring information. But conscious attention is the bottleneck. It's limited.
So we need to direct that limited attention wisely.
Exactly. And for tackling the impossible, he distinguishes between MTP's massively transformative purposes, the huge, inspiring visions.
Like changing an industry or solving a major world problem.
Yeah, those big North Stars.
Yeah.
And HHG's high, hard goals. These are the concrete, challenging milestones you need to hit on the way to the MTP.
So you need both the big vision and the stepping stones.
You need both. But critically, he says your day-to-day focus needs to be on clear, manageable daily goals. If you're constantly overwhelmed by the sheer size of the MTP, you'll struggle to get anything done, let alone get into flow.
That makes sense. So how do you manage that focus across different timescales?
He offers some practical tips, like plan tomorrow's to-do list tonight. It settles your mind and lets you hit the ground running.
I've heard that one before. Does he suggest a specific number of daily goals?
He mentions around 8 seems to be a sweet spot for many people. Enough to feel productive, but not so many that it's overwhelming. It helps you know when the day is a success.
Again, crucially, recovery.
Yes. Knowing when to stop, when to recharge without guilt, that's vital for sustaining effort long term. You can't just push indefinitely.
Okay, that's goals. What about grit? It's a buzzword, but what does Kotler mean by it?
He defines it pretty closely to Angela Duckworth. Perseverance and passion for long-term goals. He traces it back to Galton's earlier ideas of zeal and capacity for hard labor.
Passion and perseverance, sustained enthusiasm, and the ability to keep going.
Right. And there's an interesting link to happiness. Grittier people tend to find well-being through engagement, through getting absorbed in challenges.
Which often leads to flow.
Exactly. Less gritty people might seek happiness more through immediate pleasure, which tends to be fleeting. So choosing engagement over short-term pleasure actually builds more sustained satisfaction.
How does he break down persistence? Is it just willpower?
Willpower is one component, yeah. That ability to resist temptation and stay focused. But it's finite, linked to prefrontal cortex activity and energy levels.
So you can run out of it.
You can, but you can also replenish it. Food, naps, meditation, exercise all help.
What else is involved in persistence besides willpower?
Mindset is huge. Fixed versus growth mindset.
Believing your abilities are fixed versus believing you can develop them.
Right. Brain scans even show differences in activity. A growth mindset leads people to work harder, longer, and smarter when they hit obstacles.
And the third component?
Passion. That sustained enthusiasm that keeps you going even when it hurts. But just having these isn't enough. Perseverance itself needs training, often through physical challenges.
And you need the mental grit to manage your thoughts, right? To avoid burnout when the passion and purpose get frustrating.
Definitely. Which leads to what he calls mental hygiene.
Mental hygiene, like brushing your teeth for your brain.
Kind of. He suggests a 3-part practice. Managing self-talk, aiming for about a 3.1 positive to negative ratio. Grounded in reality, though.
Not just blind optimism.
No. Second, gratitude practice. It literally rewires the brain, lowers anxiety, and is strongly linked to a high-flow lifestyle.
And third?
Mindfulness. Just observing your thoughts without getting swept away by them, it creates space to choose your response.
Okay, what about the grit to deal with fear? That seems critical for impossible goals.
Yeah, he breaks that down too. First, awareness, noticing the physical sensations of fear. Then reframing it, seeing it as excitement or focus. Then practice deliberately taking small, calculated risks.
And mental rehearsal.
Yeah, recalling past successes, visualizing coping strategies, building that internal confidence.
He also talks about a specific kind of grit, the most important kind.
Ah, yes, the grit that matters most, which is being your best when you're at your worst.
Like finding that second wind when you're exhausted.
Exactly, referencing Waitskin and James. You train this by practicing under duress, pushing through discomfort, and reframing exhaustion not as a stopping point, but as a signal to dig deeper.
Wow. And finally, the grit to work on weaknesses.
Yes, actively seeking feedback, even when it's tough to hear. And gritty recovery, because pursuing big goals is inherently stressful and uncertain, so bouncing back effectively is crucial.
So motivation and grit get us moving and keep us going, but Kotler really hammers home the importance of continuous learning, right?
Absolutely. Whether it's capital I impossible, world-changing stuff, or small I impossible, personal breakthroughs, you need to develop expertise. Learning is non-negotiable.
He has that interesting truth filter idea.
Yeah, consult at least 5 experts on a question. If they disagree, dig deeper. It guards against getting stuck on one perspective.
And he's a big advocate for books over, say, blog posts.
For deep understanding, yes. Blogs and articles are great for staying current, but books offer that immersive, structured dive into a topic.
He even suggests a framework for tackling a new subject with books.
Right. Start with an intro, then an overview, then a respected scholar's take, then a deep dive on specifics, and finally, something looking towards the future. It gives you layers of understanding.
And how we read matters too, not just consuming words.
Definitely. Pay attention to terminology, take notes on what excites you or sparks connections, actively link new stuff to what you already know,
And teach it to someone else. That's always the best test of understanding.
for sure. He also mentions the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, for learning skills efficiently. Focus on the vital 20%.
But with a caveat.
Yeah, for core skills directly related to your MTP, your main purpose, you might need to go deeper than just 80%. You need real mastery there and work on both strengths and weaknesses.
Something often overlooked in peak performance talk is the people side of things. EQ.
Hugely important. Kotler emphasizes interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence. He outlines the 5 domains: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, social awareness, empathy, and relationship management.
And he suggests things like empathy can actually be trained.
Yeah, through practices like observing nonverbal cues, motor resonance, and compassion meditation.
He also challenges the old 10,000-hour rule for mastery.
By bringing in David Epstein's concept of match quality, finding the right fit between your skills, interests, and the work itself is crucial. Sometimes a period of wider exploration early on is better than locking in too soon.
And flow itself can accelerate learning.
Yeah, because it makes learning enjoyable, intrinsically rewarding. It becomes a self-reinforcing habit that constantly fuels passion and purpose.
Then he introduces this evocative term, impossible stalkers.
Yeah, people who consistently go after the extraordinary, he says they typically share 3 traits. The sheer size of their original vision, they dream big, they have an MPP, the habit of ferocity, that ability to turn suffering and setbacks into fuel, like accelerating uphill,
Wow.
and a deep understanding of habit formation. They know how to build the routines needed for the long haul.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, creativity. Kotler sees this as fundamental, not just optional.
Absolutely. Essential for societal progress, but also deeply tied to individual fulfillment, motivation, success, even financial outcomes for companies that foster it.
He runs through some classic models of the creative process. Poincaré, Wallace.
Yeah, the stages like preparation, incubation, illumination, verification, and the characteristics of divergent thinking: fluency, flexibility, originality, elaboration, thinking broadly, and generating multiple options.
And then the neuroscience, this gets fascinating, the different brain networks involved.
Right. The default mode network, active during mind wandering, making those remote connections. The executive attention network for focused thought, evaluation. And the salience network, the switchboard, monitoring everything.
He even names the specific brain parts, like the medial prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
That gets detailed. But the key takeaway is that highly creative brains seem adept at keeping both the mind-wandering network and the focus network active concurrently.
So hacking creativity is about understanding and leveraging these natural brain processes.
Pretty much. Getting your neurobiology to work for you.
What about those aha moments? Insight.
That sudden flash. Neuroscientifically, it's often preceded by a spike in activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, detecting conflict or impasse. And often, a sense of psychological safety helps.
Safety? Why safety?
It allows the brain to relax control slightly, pay attention to weaker signals, those unusual connections, and take the cognitive risk needed for a breakthrough.
And he suggests the ways to boost this, multi-tool creativity boosters.
Yeah, 4 standouts. Gratitude primes positive focus, novelty seeking. Mindfulness promotes calm, focus, openness. Broad vistas, literally looking at expansive views, like in nature, broadens attention. And solitude, crucial for incubation.
Constraints too, right? Sometimes limitations force creativity.
Definitely. And he mentions Zlotov's MacGyver method: clearly define the problem, then let your subconscious chew on it.
But creativity isn't just about single insights. There's long-haul creativity.
Right. Sustaining it over time is a different beast. It takes specific skills and can be emotionally demanding.
He lists 9 lessons for that.
Yeah, things like adopting a maker's schedule, long, uninterrupted blocks for deep work, taking long walks for mind wandering, seeking feedback that reframes your perspective.
Embracing frustration as part of the process.
Yes. Seeing it as progress, not failure. Also, understanding the collaborative nature of actually doing creative work, remembering the competition, seeing creativity as a result of hard work, not just inspiration, and keeping your word, especially to yourself.
He also makes a point about how traditional education sometimes works against creativity.
Yeah, by overemphasizing convergent thinking, finding the one right answer instead of divergent thinking. And kids' prefrontal cortexes aren't fully developed, making them naturally more creative in some ways.
And this connects back to flow, the flow of creativity.
Exactly. He links those mystical-seeming experiences, common in action sports, directly to flow states, and that idea of transient hypofrontality.
Transient hypofrontality.
Right.
The temporary quieting of the prefrontal cortex. Let's dive deeper into flow science itself.
Okay. First, busting the myth.
Mm.
We don't only use 10% of our brain. Flow involves transient hypofrontality, meaning we actually use less of certain parts, particularly the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
The brain's editor takes a break.
And the neurochemical signature of flow is pretty potent.
Oh, yeah. Endorphins for pain relief, anandamide, the bliss molecule, similar to THC dopamine for focus and reward, norepinephrine for arousal and attention. Likely serotonin and oxytocin play roles too, especially in group flow.
All contributing to focus, pleasure, and that massive learning boost, like 230% increase.
Yeah, the learning effects are significant. Plus, enhanced creativity and better collaboration when it happens in groups.
And the brain networks, salience, default mode, executive, they're all interacting in a unique way during flow.
Correct. It's a specific neurobiological signature.
Okay, let's talk triggers. How do we actually get into flow? Internal triggers first.
Complete concentration is key, aiming for blocks of 90, 120 minutes. Clear goals, knowing exactly what you're trying to do moment by moment. And those goals need to align with your bigger purpose, your MTP.
Immediate feedback is another one, right? Knowing instantly how you're doing.
Crucial. And the challenge skills balance. The task needs to be hard enough to engage you fully, but not so hard it causes anxiety. That's sweet spot.
What about external triggers? Things in the environment.
High consequences, some form of risk, whether it's physical, social, creative, intellectual. It forces focus.
Okay.
Rich environment, lots of novelty, unpredictability, complexity. Think nature, travel, even just reading widely. Embodiment being deeply tuned into your physical sensations.
And creative triggers.
Pattern recognition, risk-taking, and simply valuing creativity itself.
What about flow in groups? Social flow.
Similar principles, but adapted. Shared clear goals for the group, close listening, good communication, which provides that immediate feedback loop for the group.
Blending egos.
Yeah, collective humility, putting the group goal above individual concerns. Familiarity helps knowing how the team works. And a shared sense of control, autonomy, and competence within the group context.
It's not like you just flip a switch and you're in flow, though. There's a cycle.
Right, Kotler outlines 4 stages: struggle, release, flow, and recovery.
And you have to go through all of them. You can't just live in flow.
Nope, impossible. Probably undesirable too. The struggle phase is that initial effort, gathering information, maybe feeling frustrated.
Then release.
That's consciously letting go. Taking a break, shifting focus, allows the subconscious to work. That's often where insights pop up, like the classic shower thought.
Then flow state itself.
Yep, all the characteristics we've covered. Deep absorption, peak performance.
Are there downsides or pitfalls in flow?
Sure. If the challenge isn't quite right, or your arousal level, your energy is off. Your self-awareness drops, which is good for performance, but can lead to missing important cues sometimes. Time distortion can be tricky. And because the prefrontal cortex is less active, you might make errors you'd normally catch.
And the final stage, recovery.
Absolutely vital. Any stress is active recovery, light exercise, stretching, mindfulness over just passive rest. It helps to replenish resources faster and gets you ready to enter the cycle again sooner.
Okay, so we have all these pieces. Motivation, goals, grit, learning, creativity, flow. How do we integrate it all? Does the order matter?
Kotler argues it does. He says start with the foundation. Curiosity, passion, purpose. Get that passion recipe working first.
Build the engine before you try to drive fast.
Exactly. Then layer in the other motivators, autonomy, mastery. Set those clear daily goals linked to your MTP and HHGs.
Then add the training. Physical training for grit and ferocity.
Right. Actively manage distractions. Build habits of gratitude and mindfulness or other release practices. Train pattern recognition through broad reading.
And intentionally schedule time for flow.
Yes, dedicated sessions where you set up the triggers. And don't forget the social side, he suggests, about 120 minutes a week for social support and building EQ.
So it sounds like the art of impossible isn't really about some mystical secret.
Not at all. It's about consistent, deliberate effort on a whole checklist of things that might seem kind of unsexy on their own, managing attention, practicing gratitude, planning your day.
But they add up, compound progress.
That's the core idea. Consistent application of these evidence-based interventions leads to extraordinary results over time.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, We've really unpacked this idea that the impossible is often more about process than innate genius.
Yeah, we looked at harnessing intrinsic motivation, tapping into flow states, the importance of clear goals and serious grit, the need for continuous learning, fostering creativity.
And how to deliberately put all those pieces together.
It's a framework, really, a set of tools grounded in biology and psychology.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Now that you have this framework, this understanding that these tools aren't exclusive to superheroes or geniuses, they're available to everyone.
Hmm.
What's one thing, maybe something that feels just a little bit impossible for you that you could start working towards today, even applying just one small insight from this conversation?
Yeah. What's that first step you could take right now?